Rachel V. Hill, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of Joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel V. Hill.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is Thursday. It is the redheaded stepchild, the middle child between hump day and the weekend. But we've got a lot of sports action going on, and so I'm excited to get into it. And I have, for the second time this week with me, we don't have a cute name like Merilatt Monday, but I do have James Merilatt here in studio with me to break it all down. James, how are you, man?
I'm good, Richie. Isn't Thursday the new Friday? Like, this is going out night, right? Like, I'm in my 50s, so not for me, but like you're in that age group.
It can, I would say post-pandemic, with everyone's workflow and hybrid schedules and things changing. I think Thursday's picking up a little bit of popularity, especially if you don't have to be in the office on Friday or if you're working from afar, kind of thing. So I could see that. I mean, I will definitely have a chance at partaking in some cold pops and getting to watch the Denver Nuggets kick off their season tonight against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Pretty awesome season opening game when you think about it. You got the number 1 seed versus the number 2 from last year. Probably should have had those flipped, but that's something I think I just refuse to let go. You got the MVP against the MVP runner-up.
Yep.
You got Russell Westbrook, Brody, debuting as a Nugget against the team that drafted him. Alex Caruso's first game in a Thunder jersey. There's a lot of cool stuff.
A lot of storylines. See, now I'm old enough that Thursday used to be must-see TV, right? That's when it was like Cheers and Seinfeld and Friends and all those shows.
Yeah.
Tonight, the Nuggets and the Thunder, that's the sports version of must-see TV. Two teams that won 57 games last year. I know there's a lot of talk about the Suns and, Minnesota and other teams in the West, but to me, these are the two teams to beat in the West. Dallas obviously went to the finals a year ago, but I think it's a great way to tip off the season. I'm a little nervous about the Nuggets, though.
Okay. Tell me why.
They look like a team that isn't quite in shape and ready to roll out of the gate. I have this bad feeling they're going to start slow. Am I the only one that, maybe it's the beard, maybe it's the goatee? I think Jokic looks like he used to look. You don't like bearded Jokic? I don't mind the beard. I just feel like he looks like he used to show up. Remember when he used to show up and he would have to spend the first couple months getting himself into shape?
Yeah.
That's how he looks to me. And it's got me nervous. Once we had the bubble and he got COVID, remember when he was back home in Serbia, and all of a sudden he, lost some weight and came in and played in the bubble at a lighter weight. And he's like, oh my gosh, this game's so much easier. He's come into shape that way. Won 3 out of 4 MVPs. Probably should have won 4 in a row.
Should have, absolutely.
Did he? Maybe it's just I saw too many party videos from him on social media. I'm nervous that this team's not in shape. Jamal Murray doesn't ever seem to be in shape. I'm nervous, Richie. Talk me out of it.
Well, okay. There's a lot to unpack there. So let me start from the very beginning. One, I like bearded Jokic. I like goatee Jokic. I think that it adds, even if it's just from a surface level standpoint, it adds what I feel like is a little edge to him. He doesn't look like the babyface Serbian.
He looks like a villain.
Yeah, he looks like a henchman in a John Wick movie.
Correct.
And I like that. And I thought it was, for somebody that just seems so laissez-faire and laid back, that growing a beard, as I can say, and so can you, it's a conscious decision. You grow it out, you manicure it, you make it the right length. You got to go through the awkward stages. He made a very deliberate decision to do that. And I think it's kind of interesting because he normally doesn't do that kind of stuff. So I'll start there and say, I like it. In terms of the fears about being in shape, I'm not concerned about Jokic, or at a bare minimum, if I see something that might raise an eyebrow, I think he's earned benefit of the doubt status, at least to start a season. For me, he's like the only Nugget maybe that I can definitively say that about. Jamal Murray, I'll lean a little bit more with you there. I just think that for me, it's more or less about the in shape, but I just don't know what goes on in Jamal Murray's brain sometimes. I mean, like he's like when he's on, he's one of the better shooting point guards in the league. He's got so many clutch shots and clutch moments, but he's struggled with injuries. He's had a lot of lower body issues, from the ankle to the knee to the, whatever you have it. And I think you're already, even if he's in shape, you're going into a season where you are going to think about managing his load and being careful with his minutes and all that?
This drives me crazy. They just gave him $209 million.
I got it.
And because he's the blue marshmallow, we got to manage his minutes.
The blue marshmallow.
That's what we got to do.
Honestly, I like blue marshmallow better than blue arrow. I think blue arrow sucks as a nickname, and I wish he had a better one.
That just infuriates me to no end that they.
Well, hey,
and listen, I don't care about the money. The league and the teams are making millions. The players should get their piece. I get it, but if you're making that kind of money, you at least have the obligation to be in shape and to play 82 games unless you're injured.
Well, listen, Jamal Murray looked like the least happy guy to ever get $208 million at his opening day press conference. So there's that. And I go back and forth on this. I'm like, is he really just kind of like a moody melodrama guy? Just in general, is he trying to use this to manufacture some kind of chip? Because we know in professional sports, and it's the Jordan model of just like carving a chip out of your own shoulder kind of thing. And maybe that helps fuel him if he thinks everybody's hating on him, or even if it's kind of trumped up, or if he's causing it by his own words and his own actions. I don't know. I do know that Jokic is the best player in the world, and he's the best player on this team. But how far Jamal Murray goes has arguably just as big of an impact on the team's ceiling. So it is important.
And look, I think some of the manufactured chip on your shoulder is good, right? It used to kind of drive me crazy. It was the year they won the championship. He would get so offended when people would call him Bubble Murray, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, playoff Murray is maybe a better nickname because that sounds like
it's also not as catchy.
Right. But he would get so offended by it. And it's like, it's not but okay, it kind of gave him a chip.
He got the ultimate callback because it was Bubble Murray, playoff Murray, championship Murray. It was like the Lombardi Lenny for Leonard Fournette.
But I think it can go, exactly. I think it can go too far. And last year in the series against Minnesota, we saw it go too far, right? The throwing of the heat pack or the ice pack or whatever it was. There was the game where...
Did he throw two things in that game? Was it like a towel first and then a heat pack or something?
And then there was the game where he was, talking to his dad in the stands the whole time about the bad whistle they were getting. And it's just like, are we at an 8th grade game? Like, what's happening here? It's gone a little too far. He's a little too thin-skinned. And I think the fact that you've never been an all-star, that ought to give you a chip. Do
you need to manufacture one when you have something like that?
The way you played the Olympics and the way everybody's talking about it, like, he's got plenty of reasons.
That, by the way, is another reason why I'm not as concerned about Jokic in terms of being in shape or being in the right headspace to start a season compared to Jamal, because Jokic put on a show in the Olympics. He showed the entire world that he's a bad mamma jamma, and he can drag a bunch of C-list international Serbian players plus one to a real contention for a gold medal. Whereas Jamal and Team Canada, who was kind of a sexy, trendy pick to win their grouping, because you had SGA, you had Jamal Murray, you had arguably the best backcourt in the whole Olympics, including Team USA, and he looked awful, and they didn't make it as far as they would have liked. So I think your concerns about Jamal in terms of being in shape or being in the right headspace are more valid and reasonable than Jokic is. But let's just be honest, nationally speaking, call it voter fatigue, call it a cooler effect. The Nuggets are no longer the sexy championship darling in the championship. I believe they're 6th or 7th in the championship odds, which puts them as not even the best team to come out of the West. So you can get the Nuggets at a decent bargain if you think they're going to win a championship in kind of in terms of championship window, must win kind of scenario. And Jokic probably has more to do with voter fatigue than just cooling, but Jokic is no longer the sexy MVP pick, even though he's been arguably the best player in the world for 4 out of 5 years. And, the guy who he came in second to is now having an investigation opened up against him about player participation from the league and all that. So
I think the Nuggets have just as good a chance of getting out of the West as any other team in the West.
I do too.
I do. I love the fact that they, the Aaron Gordon signing, the Jamal signing this offseason means the core four are going to be together. And the way the NBA structure is built, and they're not going to be able to attract big free agents, like they kind of had to do that. The question is whether or not the supporting cast is as good as it was when they won a title. You lose Bruce Brown, you lose Jeff Green, then you lose KCP. All right, well, can Christian Brown step up?
Right.
Is it Peyton Watson that steps up into another role? who's going to be the big guy off the bench, who's going to be are the role players as good. I love the Russell Westbrook signing. I really do. I think he's the kind of guy, you hate him when he's on the other team, you love him when he's on your team. I love the attitude that he plays with. He's a little old school in terms of, hey, if there's a game and there's a scoreboard, let's go. That's my approach. So I kind of like the roster. It's a little bit unknown of how it's all going to gel. I will say this. You know who's somebody who gets a totally unfair rap in this town? MPJ. MPJ, every single year, has gotten better. Last year, he played in 81 games. The only game he didn't play was in Sacramento when they forgot to pack his shoes. He has to wear special shoes because he's got drop foot. And the fact that guy shows up and plays every single game.
They forgot to pack his shoes?
Do you think these guys pack their own shoes?
I don't know, James, but listen, for a guy that holds a lot of people's feet to the fire,
he missed one game.
And a lot of people's feet to the fire and is no stranger to giving criticism to people, even when it's unpopular. So the fact that you're going to be the champion for Michael Porter Jr. right now, I feel like I can almost
every year.
I can almost dig Michael Porter Jr. in your voice in my head.
No, he's my second favorite Nugget, and it's not even close.
Who's your first?
Jokic has to be one, right? But the fact that he gets better every single year. You know who's one of the most annoying NBA players in the last 20 years? Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard was as good his first year in Orlando as he ever was. He never got any better. The great players get better every single year. Jamal Murray is worse now than he was in the bubble. He's not as good a player as he was.
Yeah.
Aaron Gordon is kind of the same player he's always been. Jokic gets better every year. Michael Porter Jr. gets better every single year. I think he gets a completely unfair rap.
I disagree with you on Aaron Gordon, and you're gonna the way you fiercely defend Michael Porter Jr. I will step up to any plate. I'll be like
I love Aaron Gordon.
Jon Snow in the Battle of the Bastards with my sword.
I love Aaron Gordon. I love the fact that he's willing to accept that. Hey, you know what?
I think this is the
I'm
best.
not Batman. I'm not Robin. I'm like, what's the fourth guy in that world?
He's Alfred. He is. He'll do whatever you need. Like. He is
the fact that you had an answer for that was really good.
He is, and I said this. I said
third, Catwoman.
Yeah. I don't know. Now the Batman analogy can only go so far.
And now he's Alfred. Okay.
Is Joel Embiid the Riddler? Is he Two-Face? I said this to Jake Shapiro and to Will Peterson on this show. I think that Aaron Gordon is a rare remaining hard hat and lunch pail guy in the NBA. I think that this fit, and he alluded to it in terms of why he took a relative hometown discount when he could have got a max extension from other teams. And he took, I think it was like he shaved off about $17 million between his player option and just the overall money to get it done here in Denver. It's because he's developed a genuine bond with Jokic, and through Jokic's offense and the blueprint of the way they run this team, I think this is the best fit Aaron Gordon's ever had with a team in his entire career. When he was in Orlando, he was like Jeremy Grant in Detroit.
Right.
It was like, hey, we need you to go out and score 40 a game, and he could do that, but they suck.
How many people are self-aware enough to realize that? Right? Like, and look, you got to have a healthy ego to be a star in anything and to be great at anything. And he is a great basketball player, but he also is self-aware enough to know, like, this is a great setting for me. I don't have to, if I'm the focal point, if I'm the best player on the team, we're going to stink. I think you could do a non-anonymous GM and coaches poll in the NBA. I don't think you'd get more than a handful of coaches, GMs, basketball minds that wouldn't say, I would kill to have Aaron Gordon as the fourth option on my team. Of course. Unbelievable. Of course.
But he possesses the potential to even become a third option, which I think is incredibly important. And this goes back to the fit thing with the Nuggets, because your baby, MPJ, has been a little bit of a roller coaster.
He's going to be their second option this year.
I hope so.
Murray's their third option.
This team was constructed by Tim Connolly, first and foremost, under the premise of no one's going to be better than us at identifying, drafting, and developing homegrown talent. And they took a chance on Michael Porter Jr., who, had he not experienced the injury issues in college at Mizzou and had a little bit of a rocky start there, he would have been a lottery pick. He legitimately would have been. He was one of the highest touted prospects in the NBA, and he dropped because of all the injury concerns and passing physicals and whatnot. And Tim Connolly took a chance. He took a similar chance on a guy like Bull. Doesn't really pan out or didn't pan out when it was here. But Michael Porter Jr., they were willing to be patient and stash it and do it. And they won a title, and he's been a part of that ascension. He completely disappeared in the NBA Finals series, but they might have got bounced in the first round of the playoffs this past year if he doesn't shoot 50% from three against LA.
They would have. And to me, his next step is on two people. First one's on him. He needs to be more aggressive. He tends to disappear at times. He stands in the corner, waits for the kick out pass, and just
he needs another dimension to his game. I think.
Does. And part of that's been physical going to the rim.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the way at his height,
yeah,
and he's added strength every year. He needs to be more physical going to the rim. The other part of it, though, is it's on Michael Malone. You've got that guy on your team. You've got to run some stuff that gets him involved to make sure, hey, let's not have him disappear. You go back to game 7 against the Wolves when they blew a 20-point lead. It was 2-man game every time down. Jokic and Murray, the way they were the way Minnesota was defending it, it was pushing Jokic out beyond the 3-point line. First of all, do something different. Second of all, you got a 20-point lead and a 3-time MVP on your roster. Put him in the low block, and he's either going to score or get fouled enough you can't possibly blow a 20-point lead. So shame on Michael Malone, but he has to get MPJ more involved. Has to.
I know the answers to the question I'm about to ask you because I read the really nice piece at denversports.com that Jake Shapiro put together where he polled you and Zach Bai, Josh Dover, some of the premier basketball minds kind of in our building here about expectations for this season and you know, Jokic and things of that nature, X factor kind of conversations. But I want to give you the opportunity to broadcast those here as well, because I do think it's a conversation that on the morning of the season tip-off that I think are on a lot of Nuggets fans' minds. So what is the expectation, the bar, the floor for this Nuggets team in the 2024-2025 season?
Well, I think the floor of this team is, you know, flirting with being a play-in team. I think they could be.
Okay, let me ask it a better way. Blank or bust for the Nuggets this season?
Western Conference Finals or bust.
I
think if you don't make the Western Conference Finals, Michael Malone should be fired. Yes, because at some point, and it's the same with the Avs and Jared Bednar, at some point you have to be knocking on the door. And I throw the bubble out because they came back from 2-3-1 deficits.
It'll never happen again.
It never happened before. It'll never happen again. And because they didn't have to travel. If they'd had to travel and play on the road, they would have never come
with
back.
no fans. Yeah.
Right. So that one doesn't count. Otherwise, they've never been beyond the second round other than the year they won a championship. They're not knocking on the door every single season. To me, you got to go knock on the door again. That's Western Conference Finals. They should have been there last year. They blew game 7. Shame on them. You got to get to that point. I think if you're not at that, and look, they've signed big contracts, so they're not blowing up the roster. If you can't get beyond the second round this year, and that core forward, you're committed that much money to him for that many years, you have to change something. The only thing you could change is the head coach. So I think it's Western Conference Finals or bust for this group as it's composed, this coaching staff, this roster. You got to get there. I think they can. I think they can win the West. I think they can also flirt with being a play-in team. And I think, to me, the X factor is who are the role guys, who's going to be the off-the-bench guys, and can they get Bruce Brown, Jeff Green type of performance from them? And then who's the fifth starter? Can they get KCP? I think they can. I thought KCP was one of the most disappointing players in the playoffs last year. He just disappeared. I used to have the stat off the top of my head. I think in 8 out of the 12 games or whatever, he's failed to score double digits.
Yeah, it was.
That's very replaceable. But can Christian Brown do that? Can he be a start? Can he step up and be a starter? That to me is going to be the key to this team.
I actually can't believe that I'm going to say this. This is going to be a rare moment where I actually think I'm going to be more critical or strict or demanding than you, who I feel like has not been shy of demanding, citing the expectations that fans in this town have. And you've certainly been here as long as any of us to be a part of that. I think Western Conference Finals is too low of a bar. I think you need to make, I'm not going to fault people. If you say championship or bust for the Nuggets this year, you're going to get no argument from me.
Okay, but hang on real quick. Not to interrupt you, but or bust means something changes in the offseason. So if they don't win the NBA championship, if they lose to the Celtics,
does or bust mean something has to change in the offseason, or it's this, we need to reach this pinnacle, or we will consider this season overall a disappointment? or a failure.
Okay.
So something
bust, I guess, is it's failure. So okay. I mean,
so because here's why. Here's that specific definition is why I say put the floor the way I have. If you're saying what do they need to do for Michael Malone not to get fired, I think that does maybe widen it a little bit. But let's just assume nobody gets fired. What's considered a successful season or a failure of a season? I think you can't just knock on the door. You got to walk in the house. Now, if you do you walk in the house and put your feet up on the coffee table? I don't know, but you're at least in the house to try, because at the end of the day, this core four, now that Aaron Gordon's under contract, this core four is only locked in through the 2026-2027 season. MPJ is about to be back up again. Then you're going to go down that cascading waterfall where all the guys are 1 or 2 years apart of being locked up, including Jokic. And I don't think you're going to be able to ride that waterfall twice. I don't think it took some gymnastics and some tough sacrifices to get all of these guys locked in at first on a secondary time, and now you're coming again. I really think that the Nuggets' best opportunity to win another title is between now and 2026, 2027. So to concede one of those years by saying, we made it to the Western Conference Finals, we'll get them again next year, is fine. That it's more palatable, in my opinion. It's a tougher, easier pill to swallow to say, hey, they made it to the NBA Finals. They got beat by a Boston team who's the defending champs, or they got beat by Milwaukee or whatever it is, and they were just better. They were just better, or however, maybe it's you get swept or something like that. It's like, okay, well, I think
ultimately to be considered a success, you got to win a title. I think when you're a championship contender, when you have those aspirations, if you do anything less than that, technically it's a failure.
Look at how differently we feel about the Colorado Avalanche just 2.5 years after 2 summers ago when they won a title.
But it's because they haven't been close, right? Like if we were coming into this Nugget season and they had lost last year in 7 to Dallas in the Western Conference Finals, or they had lost in 7 to Boston, we wouldn't consider last season a failure.
No,
we do, because they lost in the second round to a Minnesota team that they were ahead of by 20 points.
Well, but the part of that is if they don't lose both games at home to start a series and then give up a 20-point lead at home to Minnesota, I think they win the title. I think they beat Dallas, who I think matches up much better for them than Minnesota did, because again, Minnesota was constructed specifically to beat the Nuggets by the guy who built them. And they were the only team that played Boston tough all year. And I don't think Boston hangs in a 7-game series. I think Boston caught a break with the team that came out of the West, less of a degree, but similar to how I'm sure a lot of people felt about the Nuggets having to play the 8-seed Heat. It's like, well, we didn't have to play Denver, OKC, or Minnesota. You know,
that was catching a green light for them in the NBA Finals for sure.
Yeah, now I have to hear all about Jason Tatum every day.
But I think the Nuggets' best chance to win a second title is this year, and then it's next year, and then it's the year after that. Like I think with each passing year, which is
why I think you have to at least be. I do think at the end of the day, there's a strong part of me that thinks you got to win it. You just got to win it, because you don't know in the offseason what happens and we don't know. There's a lot of pieces that go into that, which is why I'm going to dovetail off to this next thing. Is outside of the core four, who is the most important contributor, X factor kind of guy that's going to be able to push them over the top to win a title? Non-core four.
I think it's Westbrook.
I agree.
I think they need somebody that gives them the attitude that Bruce Brown had, right? If you go back to their championship run, it's a small moment, but one of the key moments, there was something going on. It wasn't technically a timeout, and the Suns were trying to gather in a huddle and have a timeout without a timeout on the court. And Bruce Brown went over and stood right in the middle of it. And that was this is a franchise that has always come up short and kind of been pushed around and this, that, and the other. And that was sort of like, nope, we ain't taking this bleep. Who's going to be that guy? Well, Westbrook's wired that way.
Yeah. Always has been.
He's not the player he used to be, obviously. But if he can give him a little bit of attitude and a little bit of toughness and give him some points off the bench and some defense, I think he's got a chance to be the guy that puts him over the top. I
agree with you. I think a lot of people might say Christian Brown, but listen, Christian Brown's going to be thrust into a starting role. He's going to have his own thing to deal with. And so I think that's kind of an easy answer to say, hey, outside of the core four, who's going to need to make the biggest impact? The fifth guy. But the Nuggets' biggest Achilles heel in a lot of clutch moments has been they can't survive the non-Jokic minutes.
Yeah.
And it forces Jamal to have to run with the second unit, AG to have to run with the second unit, and it contributes to that fatigue, which in their words is why they ran out of gas and they just didn't have enough in the tank, and why there was the debate.
Such an excuse. I
agree. The debate between playing for seeding or playing for health and rest and all that, which I actually think we're going to get to see that the dichotomy of that. We kind of saw it as a last minute deal. I mean, they tried to play for the seed, but after they lost to San Antonio, it was like, oh, we don't know if we're going to be able to.
If they don't lose to San Antonio, they're in the NBA Finals.
I agree. The path is totally different.
So they've never won a series as a lower seed outside of the bubble.
You're going to get get a chance to see that this year.
Well, then they're not going to go.
I think
they're not. They've lost twice in a Game 7 on their home court with Michael Malone as the head coach. They're not going. They've never won a series as a lower seed with him as their head coach ever.
I think
with a 3-time MVP on their roster.
In my opinion, this is just me speculating. I think you are going to see them play for seeding and play for rest and overall health from the start of the season rather than making that decision post All-Star break. So I'm not going to be surprised if the Nuggets roll in as a 4 seed or a 3 seed.
That's why I say, though, I think that's a very dangerous game to play. That's why I think that's how you end up flirting with the 6 or 7. And are you going to be a play-in team?
Yeah.
That's why I picked them to only win 48 games, which will be a major disappointment because I do think they're going to buy into this nonsensical narrative that it was fatigue and that they were tired. Give me a freaking break. You fly charter, you stay at the Four Seasons, you have 1,000 thread count sheets that you lay on, you have a masseuse, you have a dietitian, you have all the rest of this stuff. Back when and this is going to be old man here, but back in the day, you could go to Stapleton Airport and have an early flight and see the Celtics sitting there waiting to catch their flight at 8 a.m. on Braniff so they could go play in Utah on a commercial flight. Like, I just don't buy this. It's a bunch of BS. It's such BS. It's an excuse, and they're going to buy into it. They're going to buy into it.
Speaking of narratives.
Sorry, that was my rant for the day.
Speaking of narratives and leaning into the old man thing, back in your day, the Colorado Avalanche were winning Stanley Cups right out of the gate after coming here from Colorado, and they were doing so on the head of one unbelievable Hall of Fame all-time great goaltender who also had a couple of decent goaltenders behind him over the years. Right now, the Avs could put both of their goaltenders together, and maybe it might buy them a bag of chips at a gas station. So that being said, we may have, even if it's not a heavyweight fight, we seem to be on the doorstep of a legitimate goalie controversy competition between the pipes for the Avs in 2024. What have you thought about Bednar's decision after publicly and confidently defending him? Gorgie's our guy. He's our this, he's our that, to playing Justus Annunen for 3 straight games and maybe another.
I think it's the right decision.
I agree.
I think listen, you can't pay everybody. So would it be nice to have a big money goaltender? It would be, but they've decided to pay other people. Yeah. This is a team that's built to win 5-4. You have to have a goaltender that's just competent. That's just fine. Night in and night out is fine. Can hold the other team to 3 or 4 goals. And then it's up to McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen, Val when he comes back, Gabe if he comes back, to put up 4 or 5 to win it. They're not built to win 2-1. They're not Tampa Bay. So you just got to find which guy can go out and be fine. And if one of them is being terrible, then you got to go with the other guy.
Yeah.
And, Annunen hasn't been like all world standing on his head. They don't need that. They don't. And so if he can just go out and be just adequate, then they're A-okay.
I'm actually going to slightly disagree with you there. I agree with you that this team, just as it was in 2021 when they won the Stanley Cup and went 16-4 to do it, was built to win games 6-4, 5-3. And it worked. I have never seen a hockey team as relentless in the offensive zone as the 2021 Avs on the way to that cup. I legitimately could not imagine being a goaltender opposite that Avs team when they have the puck in your zone 70+% of the game. They are tripling you and then some in shots on goal. And it just must have felt like being underneath an air raid.
It was just waves.
Wave after wave. And it's like being at it's like being in the death trap wave pool at Waterworld, and there's 40,000 rafts flying around, and you're just getting banged around, and you come up for air, and you get that's a great analogy. I can't imagine that. the Avs since then, including this year, don't have that kind of firepower anymore. So they're built to win 5-3, 6-2, but they don't have the offensive output that can match that. So now you have that with the fact that their goaltending has not gotten any better than it really was with, in fact, in some ways it may have gotten worse than it was with Kemper and Frankie. So I actually do think that if the Avs are going to win a Stanley Cup this season or in the near future, they need to find a way to have a goaltender who can be more than just adequate, because they don't have the same firepower thus far that they did when they made it work.
Well, I mean, once Val comes back, I think they do.
Maybe.
I think they do.
Maybe.
Like when Val played, and that's what was so disappointing about the last two postseasons. When he played, they were a Stanley Cup contender. When he didn't play, they couldn't get by.
You want to talk about
Seattle.
You want to talk about splits. We talked about it with Jokic, like the minutes he's on the court versus the minutes he's not, the difference in plus minus or the difference in record, right? And things like that. The Avs scoring and their overall record when Val Nichushkin is on the ice versus when he's in the, player assistance program or just off the ice in general is staggeringly different. They're barely a 500 team without him.
Well, and because they spent their money is essentially tied up in five guys. It's McKinnon, it's McCarr, it's Rantanen, it's Val, it's Gabe, right? Those five guys. Gabe's that's just a bad break. He's been hurt. Will he ever come back? We'll see. When the other four are out there, they're a cup contender. If they don't think they can get the same kind of offensive firepower from those four guys that they got when they won a cup, then they need to trade Val if somebody will take him, or they need to trade Rantanen, because that contract situation, you can't let him leave at the end of the year for nothing. You need to trade him and go get a goaltender and say, we're going to build this team in a different way. That's the decision Chris McFarland needs to make.
And I don't think I think that that's a fair, viewpoint of the two forks in the road that they're at. I don't think that that's in the cards for them, which is why I think this goalie decision and the performance of Georgie versus the performance of Annunen has a massive implication on how far this team can actually go. Because
they're choosing between a 5 and a 6.
I got it. Listen, Frankie came into the Stanley Cup playoff during that championship run and had like 4 solid starts.
Yeah, but he also wasn't he in goal when they won 8-6 in Edmonton? Who couldn't win that game? They scored 8 goals.
That's true. I was at that game.
I mean, he technically got a win. It's like being a pitcher and you go out and you get shelled and you give up 9 runs, but your team scores 11, so you got the win. Like, well,
I got it. But what I'm saying is, I truly believe that with Georgie in net, with what we've seen in the last couple of years that he's here in the start of this season, you're not going to strike lightning twice. The Avs won the Stanley Cup with Darcy Kemper, who's arguably the worst starting goalie to ever win a Stanley Cup in NHL history when you look at save percentage and just the overall performance of it. That team was powerful enough to mask that deficiency. This team thus far, and could it change when those guys come back? Yes. Do we know that all of those guys are going to be back? I'm pretty confident, and Gabe on social media and in person seems pretty confident that he's going to come back. But is he 50, 60, 70, 80% Gabe? Is he back for the entire season? Is he playing 8 minutes a game on the third and fourth line? Is he back up to a, third, second line guy? I don't know.
Yeah.
Lehkonen is going to come back hopefully in the next 3 weeks or so. And I think that should make a big impact. You'll get Drouin back in a little bit as well. And with Val, we are just waiting for that test to come up wrong once he comes back.
Well, when the postseason rolls around, we're all going to be holding our breath the entire time. But and it's kind of interesting. It's a little bit like the formula the Broncos used to win a Super Bowl, all about defense. And historically, we've seen some defensive-minded teams win a Super Bowl. The Bucks won one back in the day. The Ravens won one, but they were never able to repeat it. It's a formula that isn't repeatable. And the Broncos kept thinking they could do it. We can win with Trevor. We can, right? And they couldn't. The Avs, maybe it's the opposite formula, but it may be something that in hockey is not repeatable. Trying to win a cup, winning games 6-5, 5-4, 8-6, with a goaltender that is just a 5. They haven't been able to do it since. They really weren't able to get close before. So it'll be interesting to see. But listen, man, that's the formula they've built. There's nothing they can do to change it unless they want to trade one of the two guys I mentioned for a top flight goaltender. And I don't even know if that's possible.
And I don't know that it's possible either, which is why I think Annunen, who got to wear the big hat, he got to wear the big funny hat in the post-game interviews and all that. We've never seen Georgie get one of those. I think I agree with, and Bednar's already said that Eustace has played well. He's going to get more opportunities to start. He's already backing that up. And we're going to see how it goes. I think you have to ride the hot hand. Georgie's shown you nothing that says like, hey, well, we got to give this guy a little bit more rope or a little bit more leeway. He hasn't. I could see that of being the case with like Kemper. It's like, hey, this guy just helped you win a Stanley Cup. If he's not playing well, whatever, have faith, trust the process. I think you got to run with Georgie, and I think, you got to run with Annunen, and I think Annunen's leash should be longer than what you just gave Georgie, because once you go back, and it's a long season, so there's going to probably be some flip-flopping, and you never know. But if this current trajectory continues, I don't know why Eustace Annunen isn't your starting goalie in the postseason. And I know we're only going off a 3-game sample size. I'm not trying to extrapolate, beyond what's
Everybody
necessary.
loves the backup quarterback. Like,
I don't, though. I don't. I just don't like our starting quarterback in this case.
Well, exactly. It's like if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. If you have 2 goaltenders, you have none.
Yeah.
So I think you just go. I think they both have a short leash. I think you go with whoever's playing better at the time. I don't know that they're ever going to have a hot goalie.
Yeah.
It's who's just not a cold goalie.
And I'll say this too about the need to be the way they are constructed to win the games, like you said, 6-4, 5-2, whatever it is. That's got to be mentally taxing and exhausting on the offensive side of the ice for guys like McKinnon and Rantanen and even Makar, because he's definitely been more of an offensive presence than a defensive presence. He's like tied for the lead in points in the NHL or close to it last I looked. That's taxing for those guys. It's got to be exhausting to go like, hey, we got to find the back of the net. We got to light that lamp 5 or 6 times, or we got no shot. But it's the equivalent of like, it would be the reverse of the Broncos this year. If we were going out there being like, Bo Nix has got to put up 35 or we're toast.
Well, they're going to be toast, but like one side of the ball, one side of the ice, one side of whatever always has to be the one that's carrying the weight. Right. So if you're an offensive minded football team, it's like, we got to go out and put up 30.
Yeah. But
this isn't where you spend all your money.
This isn't just hold my bag real quick, carry the weight. This is, I'm going to be unconscious, drag me up the mountain kind of weight.
Like the no-fly zone, like that defense. They had to carry the weight almost every single game.
They did. Now, I would feel a little bit different or a little bit better. The Super Bowl 50 defense in 2015, you still had Peyton Manning on the other side of there. And even if he was only 65, 70% of himself, mentally he was at 100%. And what he could do at the line of scrimmage and all that, I think sometimes gets forgotten about in terms of what it forces the opposing defenses to do just because he's there. So if we had a 35-year-old aging star goalie that was just struggling from a physical standpoint, but it's like that, I would feel differently. We just got a couple of guys. We got a young guy and another guy who's relatively young, and it's just not there.
They just, for the most part, invested their money on that end. So that's the group that's got to carry the load.
Yeah, you have 5 arguably top 20 players in hockey, and 3 of them in the top 10, maybe.
Right, and it's on at that end of the ice. So that's how you got to win games.
Yeah, we'll see. They got the Utah Hockey Club coming up, and we will see where they go with it. I think we're going to be talking about this goalie situation a lot over this course of this season.
Was it you and I that were on the day after the opener?
Oh, yeah.
And we were talking about like, it's already the first game and this is the story. Here we are now, 8 games in, and it's still the story. It's going to be the story all year long.
Yeah. Now, as a part of that story, though, they lost 4 straight. They've now won 3 in a row. So, in some ways, it's like if they beat Utah and they get back to 500 and they do that, it's like, hey, well, you're 4-4 regardless of how you got there. I don't necessarily believe that. But I think it's important to get back above 500 with the start that you had, or at least match it. I do think that the Broncos have an interesting dynamic coming up this Sunday. They've got the Carolina Panthers, who were already a banged up disaster, but now due to their starting quarterback at the time and Andy Dalton getting in a car accident, which I'm thankful that he's okay and his family's okay. It's got to be a scary situation, but he's not playing this weekend, and they're going to go back to the fallen angel, Bryce Young, the number 1 overall pick, who's been benched and is in a downward trajectory in a major way. He's going to be starting. They just came off a big blowout win against the backup Saints. One of the more banged up injury reports I've seen in a long time. Is this a trap game for the Broncos?
No.
You don't think so?
No, they're not good enough to think. They're not good enough to be looking ahead.
It's still the NFL, though, James. And anytime
if they lose this game, if they lose on Sunday,
weren't we saying that about the Saints?
Yeah, and they went out and blew. I mean, they blew New Orleans out. Look, the Broncos are the best JV team in the league, meaning they're the best of the bad teams. There's a lot of bad teams. You can be a playoff contender being the best of the bad
teams. The Steelers do it every year.
Go beat all the bad teams, and you know what? You're going to be in the race right till the end. And you start looking ahead at their schedule with Carolina, Indianapolis, Cleveland, some of the teams that are on there. Like, if this team doesn't get to 9 wins, it's going to be a disappointment. You got to steal, and they got the Raiders again. The Raiders are. I think the
game against
one game.
I think the game against the Atlanta Falcons is the coin flip game. I think.
That's your playoffs.
I think it's reasonable to suspect that you're going to get your head kicked in by Kansas City
twice,
and your teeth kicked in by Baltimore. I think that
although the Chargers game out there is a home game for the Broncos.
The Chargers are historically a team, even when as bad as the Broncos have been, that's a team you've been able to at a minimum split with. You ended the streak against the Raiders, so could I see a split on the back end there too? Although they look like they just traded away. Yeah, they just traded away Devontae Adams and all that. So I think in division, you've got a chance to pick up a couple of games. I think
they could be the worst 11-win team in NFL history. They've got a shot to get to 11 because their schedule is so easy.
Yeah.
They haven't beaten anybody. The teams they've lost to are mediocre at best.
I'll say this though, just like when I'm watching a football game and they're lining up for a field goal and the announcer goes, "He's a perfect 51 of 51 from this distance." I'm like, well, that's a miss. And sure enough, when I see an entire panel of pregame judges or an entire network of NFL personalities pick one side, man, do I want to zag the other way. I hear you. The NFL builds parity into their sport better than anyone else. And do I think the Broncos need to go out there and win? Absolutely. But it's going to lead you to my next question, which let's just assume for the sake of argument, we both think they're going to win and think they need to win, think they should win.
They need to win big.
Do style points matter?
100%. If you go out and win this game 13-10, none of us are going to think they got a shot against Baltimore and Kansas City. It's going to be like, really? It's going to feel about as good as the 10-9 win over the Jets in a monsoon. I'm like, yeah, technically you got to win, but do you feel good about anything you learned about this team? We got to see this team go out there against a bad defense. I think they're 32nd against the run, 26th against the pass. Go out and put up 400 plus yards. Go up and put 30 some points on the board where it's based on the offense. It's not based on the defense continually putting you in a good spot like it was against the Raiders. Like, go out there and dominate. Hey, Bo Nix, how about here's an idea. How about a Bronco rush or receive for more than 100 yards for the first time since week 2 of last year?
I just don't want. I'll settle for Bo Nix not being the leading rusher for like the 4th time in 8 games or the 3rd time. In 7
right-handed
games.
Tebow has been great at that. He's been really good at that.
Right-handed,
but
Tebow.
It's not going to. That's not sustainable.
That's fine. You bring up Tim Tebow. I think it's a funny jab. I'll give you that.
I'm the biggest Tebow fan going.
I think Bo Nix can throw a football significantly better than Tim Tebow. I felt that way after 2 games. Oh yeah.
I think Tebow could easily split the difference between a wide open guy.
But I think Tim Tebow could run the ball better than Bo Nix does. Tim Tebow is one of the better running athletes that I had seen in a long time.
They won a game this year when they had when Bo Nix had negative passing yards in the first half.
Does that cancel out?
That is the most Tebow-esque thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that cancel out like Tim Tebow winning a game, throwing like 6 passes against the Chiefs or whatever that was? 2 completions.
Yeah,
like 2 for 8.
It's the same game.
I think this is actually a more nuanced conversation or question than it seems on the surface, because on one hand, I do subscribe to the notion in some ways, especially in the NFL, where you have so few games and every game matters, that there's survive in advance. You win by an inch, you win by a mile, you still win, right? And you can learn and collect and regroup and go forward. But I think that the blowout against the Saints was a little bit of an aberration. I think that you had some defensive help to get to that point. and you had one called back, right?
Yeah, and you also had the team was just super motivated. And listen, this is actually a good sign that they were that much behind their head coach.
Yeah.
That's a great sign.
Yeah, they rallied.
And they did rally for him. There's no rallying point this week. I'm just saying, if you lose to Carolina at home with the chance to move to 5-3, all the good is gone.
Do I think they need to go out and beat the Panthers by the same amount that they beat the Saints, blow them out and run them into the dirt? No. You can't win. In my opinion, you can't win 10-9. I agree with, because not for what we need to see out of this team, but honestly, for them, for that locker room, I think that they as a team, if Bo's going to continue to progress and they are going to continue to compete this season, but honestly, beyond this season, I feel like as a team and an offense, you have to be able to believe that you can just go out, get a lead, and hold it. You can't always be looking over your shoulder, wondering or praying that the defense is going to bail you out of something. I think there's a confidence that comes with that. So do they need to win 41-10? No. But would I be satisfied with like a 27-13 win? Sure. Go out there and look good.
But a 2-touchdown win in the NFL that's a blowout.
Yeah.
So what are they favored by? 9? Something like that.
Yeah.
They're one of the biggest favorites on the board. They're going to be the team everybody's picking in the survival pool this week. You got to, and not that it's about the gambling notion, but it's like, go exceed expectations. Go cover. Go cover. And I think you're happy with it. But I want to see short of the sticks Knicks do something. I want to see him do something.
The notion that good teams win and great teams cover is usually applied on the back end. When a team loses but still covers their point spread, but I think it can be equally applied in this case. I just want to see a clean offensive game where they are from wire to wire. We've seen them have to come back from ugly situations. They've had enough ugly wins so far this season, or gritty, grimy wins this season, for me to be like, okay, that's fine. I've had my fill of that. The Saints blowout, again, I think was a little bit of an aberration. I think it was really scripted for you to be it that way. I mean, I think, no Chris Olave being there. I understand PS2 wasn't there either, but no Chris Olave, no Rashid Shaheed. The laundry list of injuries that must have been that long on the stat graphic. You're playing Spencer Rattler, not Derek Carr.
Right.
I think it was really manufactured to be that way. So to kind of like what you alluded to, make it not a fluke. Go out there, and you don't have to blow them out the same way that you did there. Go out and win a game. I'll never apologize or be frustrated with scoring from your defense, but it'd be nice to go and say, hey, we went out and won by double digits without a pick six or without a fumble return for a touchdown by Cody Barton.
Right. I mean, Will Lutz had 4 field goals. Cody Barton had a touchdown in defensive touchdown. And
then, 4 field goals because they weren't good on third down in the red zone or otherwise. Right. So just go out there and play a clean offensive game and show your defense, we got you. You know what I mean? Like you've been carrying us, you've been helping us. We can share some of that load. That's how I look at it. So if that means that style points matter, then yes, I think style points matter.
All right. We're in agreement on that one.
Well, I think they're
going to win. The Buffs are going to win. It's going to be a great football weekend.
What do you think about the Buffs game this weekend?
I have a really good feeling. I think they're going to win big. I think this is a team that's going to run the table. I think they're going to end up being in the Big 12 title game because the conference is so tight. Something weird's going to happen.
You think the Iowa States, the BYUs, they're going to cannibalize each other?
I mean, Iowa State could have lost was it last week that the guy dropped the ball running into the end zone?
It's always weird to say like, hey, they look like a fluky, but we're saying it about the Kansas City Chiefs, right? It's always weird when you have an undefeated team that's like they're the flimsiest undefeated team in the conference or in the league or in the whatever. So I get that notion a little bit at the top of the Big 12 because I think overall the Big 12 is not as good as I thought it was going to be. I think Kansas State might be the best team overall.
And the Buffs should have beat them without their best player.
And they should have beat him. You absolutely cannot give up a 2-play touchdown drive after you take the lead with 2 minutes left in a game.
But the 10-2 Buffs, even if they don't make the Big 12 title game, are very interesting at-large conversation.
I asked that question as well because I think that with the expanded playoff, these are the conversations that you have. And I would argue that even if they don't necessarily deserve it on paper, I think the amount of eyeballs, because just like I think it might have been you and I that talked about this, and I've definitely been banging the gavel for it all week. We need to remember that the College Football Playoff Committee is not Boy Scout board. It's not, well, these are the 12 best teams in college football. It's these are the 12 teams that we think are going to put on the most entertaining product and make the most money. And I can't think of a bowl committee that if Colorado is in the hunt, in the conversation, but not a conference winner, that wouldn't go, give me Coach Prime. Give me Coach Prime over a 2-loss USC team or something like that, or whatever it is. Because every team, first of all, they have a proven track record of this. They were the ratings bonanza most watched team in college football last year when it totally fell apart toward the end.
Yeah.
They've continued that trend this year, and I loved that stat graphic that came up during the Arizona game, that every team that Colorado has played has been that team's most viewed game, highest rated game. So they are not only the talk of college football, the teams they're playing against are, and we like UCF, players were coming to the UCF game at UCF as a part of a Colorado recruiting thing.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I do think that you're going to get 2-loss SEC teams that are going to get deference. You might get a 2-loss Big Ten team. Ohio State losing to Oregon really kind of makes the top of the Big Ten kind of interesting. And so I think you're not going to, a 2-loss Big 12 team is not going to beat a 2-loss SEC team. I don't think.
No.
And you have the last spot reserved for the group of 5, the best group of 5 team and all that. But until I'm proven otherwise, if Colorado can run the table and be a 10-2 team that didn't play in the Big 12 title game and get that 3rd loss as a result of it, I don't see why they wouldn't be in a college football playoff conversation.
And we'll see a lot of time left, see how it all unfolds, but they just need that conversation to, if it's USC and it's the LA market, the committee might pick them. If it's Notre Dame, the committee might pick them. If it's, just to use examples, Iowa State or K-State or BYU,
not a chance.
They're going to take Colorado.
100%.
So we'll see how it all unfolds. But listen, I think they have a chance to run the table. That would be one of the biggest sports stories in a long, long time in these parts. Let's hope they do it, and I think they get off to a good start Saturday night.
Last one on the way out, just because I can't resist. In terms of Travis Hunter, we've seen him now deal with intermittent injuries for a couple of years now. He's cooling a little bit on the Heisman front, which I think is fair. Do you think it would be wise to limit Travis Hunter to one side of the ball, or at least significantly favor one side of the ball more than the other for the remainder of this season?
No, I'm not a bubble wrap guy. I think if you can play, you can play. I think you have look, if you wanted to say, hey, let's have him avoid injury, you would say, we'll put him on offense, because when you're tackling with your shoulder, that's more dangerous. 100%. Well, he got hurt on offense. Yeah. So,
but you're also deeper at receiver than I think you are at defensive back.
Right. So then you're trying to guess, right? So the logic would tell you put him on offense. They have plenty of receivers. So they don't need to put him there. Put him on defense. Well, then you got to tackle, but he got hurt. Like, you start doing these mental gymnastics of figuring it out. You can either play or you can't play. If you're healthy enough to play, go play how you always play.
That was like that reminds me of the clip of, did you see the clip of Shador on the sidelines during the Arizona game, where it was like, hey, 14, are you healthy? You ready to play? And he's like, man, I hurt my shoulder. He's like, that's not what I asked you. Can you catch this fade route or not?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the way it is. I think if you go into any game and you're limited in some way, then you probably just shouldn't play.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. We got a lot of things to look forward to starting tomorrow and into this weekend, and I can't wait to break it all down. James, thanks for hanging out with me.
You bet.
Everybody else, we'll see you tomorrow. Get back to work.